We're officially live with our first installment of the Layer 3 show. And this is our first episode, so forgive me if it's going to be a little bit rough. We're still figuring out the format and, the official, kind of way this is going to work. But essentially, we just wanted to make kind of a weekly sort of thing or bi-weekly thing where we just kind of talk about tech news, what's happening in the world, get, myself and maybe some other people in the future potentially talking about just cool topics, stuff that we find interesting, get our input, other people's inputs on it, and really just kind of make something pretty informal because a lot of our content is very professional, business facing sort of, stuff, but we all like to have our fun. And, the news is always changing. There's always new stuff going on in technology every day. So there's always plenty to talk about. So this week's going to be our first installment of the Layer 3 show. And we got some pretty interesting topics. I've broken it down into a couple different sections. So let's take a look at what we got on the docket today. Our first topic is in enterprise networking. It's AI-driven network automation gathers momentum at AutoCon 3. So at the network automation forums, AutoCon 3 and Prague, vendors like GUIware demonstrated how intelligent automation is transforming network operations. NetOps teams showcased capabilities to push 99% of global changes within 24 hours, paving the way for self-operating autonomous networks. And our source for that was at AutoCon 3 coverage in May 2025. And I've kind of formulated some questions for these. One of the ones that came up for this was, what are the biggest risks and benefits to allowing automation to push nearly all networking changes? So this topic in particular, a lot of us have played with many networking platforms, whether it come to Ubiquity, Extreme, Cisco. All of them have kind of implemented their own AI sort of flavor into their sort of backbone offering. And a lot of it is well-intentioned, but sometimes comes out malformed or misconstrued. And of course, we all know AI loves to hallucinate because you have to prompt engineer very well to get a very good response out of it. A lot of people are just like, I want A and B to work together. And the AI will just kind of spit out a generic answer to get A and B to work together. It doesn't consider other factors of your environment. So a lot of people have been implementing, again, AI into their networking platforms. I don't think the network engineering community is fully ready for 100% autonomous networks because of just how much we rely on these manual configurations for certain things like, BGP, OSPF, a lot of these sort of protocols that we've built over the last, decades of network engineering, we've put in very specific configurations and very unique things. So I don't think AI is there yet for full network operations. And I don't think it will ever really be that way because you'll still need people behind the scenes driving certain key decisions, doing a lot of these things. Again, it's kind of just like the topic of AI taking over jobs, right? Can we just straight put up AI in specific people's places? And a lot of industries are finding out that that's actually causing a lot worse outputs and a lot worse performance because they actually needed those key people with that institutional knowledge to use AI to actually output and increase performance. You actually need both of those things to happen. And I think this is going to be the same with network engineering. I think we still need that to happen. I don't think we'll ever be able to get rid of network operations teams, but I do hope that some of these AI tools that we are showcasing are going to help them, are going to actually make their lives easier. So that happened this last week, I believe, in May 2025. So our next topic kind of bleeds into that is, our top 20 SD-WANs providers for 2025 reveal. This is a SD-WAN and SASE Converge. So this is from Channel Futures. It released its 2025 CF20 list, including leaders like Cisco, Juniper, Cato Networks. And the trend shows that SD-WAN is actually rapidly emerging with security capabilities to form unified SASE platforms, helping enterprises streamline secure connectivity. And our source was the Channel Future CF20 list for May 2025. And one of our questions is, how do you see the convergence of SD-WAN and SASE impacting enterprise network design, in the next 10 to 15 years? So SD-WAN is, for those of you guys who are very, unfamiliar with it, is basically converging all of your endpoints or remote sites kind of in this software-defined networking field, right? Where we can basically make everything look seamless, right? All of our endpoints are sort of hyper-converged in that way. A can talk to B, can talk to C, we have true enterprise fluidity with networking distributed across remote sites. So that comes with some inherent risks with security, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I think SD-WAN is only going to continue to rise as we're starting to get rid of like dedicated dark fiber, and a lot of these dark nodes becoming super expensive to operate for a lot of customers that we talk to and we see, and becoming really inefficient from a cost to benefit ratio. Why not just throw a router there, do SD-WAN, and get a cheap, leased coax or a cheap leased fiber connection, with a, couple hundred megs a month, right? Instead of needing to run a lot of these, super, super expensive dark level connections that are direct, right? So that is definitely a trend that is occurring. So I definitely think that will be, our future. I think that already is happening and is currently the future. So into our next section, we have our internet infrastructure section, and we have a major BGP route leak that was actually contained by RPKI filtering. So Cox Communications AS22773 accidentally leaked 4,600 plus prefixes into the global routing table. Now, thanks to the growing adoption of RPKI origin invalidation, most of these invalid prefixes were automatically dropped, showing a strong defense against propagation of erroneous routes. And our source was Apnic Labs, the BGP leak analysis for May 2025. And our forming question is, given the recent BGP leak and Cox security flaw, noting in our dark reading, we'll link that in the description, how should ISPs balance internal app security and external routing hygiene? So BGP is the backbone of our modern day internet infrastructure and a lot of people's own internal infrastructure as well. And that being the border between those two can often have some configuration complexities, and misconfigurations happen very often with BGP, inadvertently, leaking a lot more routes that should not be or should be, because BGP is essentially a trusted sort of protocol. You're validating certain origins to announce specific prefixes as ASs, right? So we kind of just got the whole, I trust you because you're advertising these routes and you're a core internet provider, right? Or you're a core backbone provider. So you're announcing, these routes and you have the authority to, and we kind of believe that. That makes a lot of these BGP attacks so unique and so, the threat level of that just goes from, a 5 or a 6 to a 10, right? If we can actually expose and break BGP to do things that it was not intended to do, that can cause mass havoc, right? This isn't a simple DDoS that, a couple terabytes of traffic was thrown at a certain endpoint, causing it to be unreachable. This was people actually, leaking routes that were not being intended to, whether, a simple configuration mistake or if it was an actual, potential compromise. In either case, Cox is just one of, many examples for this kind of problem with BGP. And luckily, IETF is undergoing a lot of, different protocols for a lot of these BGP security related issues. So I believe in the future we will see a lot more reform in actually making BGP a way more secure protocol that's already been in the works and talked about. I think we're actually going to see a lot of that happen really soon. So yeah, our next topic is Bell Canada and Telefónica or Telefónica suffer outages due to faulty network updates. I believe that second one is a Spain ISP. Bell Canada experienced a major outage due to a botched router software update affecting over 140,000 complaints were on the down detector at that current time. Obviously, that may not mean 140,000 actual users, but we can assume that number is, it's a big number, right? The down detector was going crazy that day. Similarly, Telefónica in Spain faced a national outage tied to a failed upgrade, a similar instance. Both incidents underlie the critical need for robust change management and rollback strategies. The source was our Global News Canada and the Data Center Dynamics DCD News in Spain. So our question that I've kind of formed is, what safeguards or testing protocols can we implement and should we make mandatory before applying router software updates at scale? This is the classic IT update it and patch it without actually testing it in any sort of environment, and we'll just see what happens. It happens all the time, right? I've done it. We've done it. It's super, it's classic. It's classic IT move. This happens all the time. I don't know what repercussions we can actually make companies like this face to, actually go through and test these kinds of things, right? What can we make, them do better next time around to make sure things like this don't happen? Relatively simple things to test, right? We could have easily thrown this into an environment and seen, having a test or, a smaller environment take that hit before, what is reportedly over 140,000 instances of outages from users. I mean, that's a lot of people. That's a lot. So I think there's a lot better change management that we can always implement. That's a growing thing in IT, right? That's not just a specific to, Bell Canada, right? Like that's just across the board is, and I'm guilty of it too. I'll take a risk. I'll just throw the update out there and see kind of what happens and make sure we're good. I've been guilty of it before too. So, that's another classic scenario, right? So next is our security section. So we have a critical 0-day vulnerability found in Versa Networks SD-WAN software. Researchers identified severe vulnerabilities in Versa Networks SD-WAN software. I believe it's Concerto, that could allow full host compromise through authentication bypass and Docker container escape. The most serious flaw, which is CVE 2025-34027, scored a CVSS of 10. Versa has since patched the issues, emphasizing the importance of timely controlled updates. And our source for this one was the Hacker News in May 2025. And our question is, how could enterprises improve their vulnerability management process to address issues in the SD-WAN controller before attackers can exploit it? Now, I'm not too privy to Versa Networks offerings in their SD-WAN department, but this attack in specific was to do with their platform being in a Docker container and having Docker container escape. We've had a lot of other companies have similar issues where their software is containerized by Docker and allowing for, erroneous kind of code execution through a Docker escape sort of mechanism. Whether that's to the fault of some programming issue on their side or an actual Docker container issue, I think a lot of it is just having the best security approach to, only allowing what we need through, right? Always minimizing and layering our security, right? We talk about that all the time. The Swiss cheese approach, if we throw enough layers on it, yeah, there's bound to be a hole somewhere, but if we can layer it as much as we can, then we make the attack vector harder. So, it's really just keeping on time with your updates too. As soon as they release the update to this, I believe many people, instantly kind of patched it. So it's really just keeping on top of that. And our next topic is we have a 6.3 terabyte DDoS attack hits KrebsOnSecurity among largest ever recorded. KrebsOnSecurity was hit by a massive DDoS attack from the Asuru botnet, peaking at 6.3 terabytes. This was mitigated by Google's Project Shield. The attack underscores the growing scale of botnet-powered DDoS threats and the importance of high-capacity, high-security defenses. Our source was KrebsOnSecurity and Google's Project Shield. And our question is, are today's commercial DDoS mitigation solutions truly prepared for multi-terabit scale attacks, and what gaps remain in the future? Now, DDoS attacks, of course, are still, prevalent today, and this apparently being one of the largest, if not, I believe, the largest recorded with Google's Project Shield. But I mean, this was huge. This was 6.3 terabytes per second. So I mean, that's a lot of data, and the fact that Shield was able to take that on, that's actually a pretty cool feat for their project. I don't think a lot of people are as prepared for something like this, right? Like if you're targeted at the end of the day, there's no stopping someone who's erroneous or an attacker from being able to do something like this, right? Even if you attempted to put all the stopgaps in, we can only learn from these kinds of, massive attacks and kind of really get a threat profile built for yourself, right? Learn who your potential attackers are. If you're, a public, facing news outlet or news entity, right? DDoSes might be in your threat profile, right? Or your attack vector. Or if you're a completely air-gapped instance, your threat profile looks completely different than someone who's a public-facing news outlet organization, right? They could have very similar attack styles and methods, but their approaches to get them to be executed may be completely different. So I don't think a lot of people are currently doing as much security as they could, right? That's a generic statement. I mean, we could say that about anything, but I think this comes down to actually what we could actually take away from this as people reading this is, run tabletop exercises. Who are your current threat actors, right? What does your threat profile look like? So it's always a great reminder to keep that up to date, to build out who might want to do something to you. What are your potential attack vectors? How would they exploit them? It's a very, very good opportunity to run that and update that, annually. So our next section is our standards and protocols section. So our global IPv6 usage hits 43%, and the US crosses a 50% threshold. Google reports that IPv6 now accounts for 43% of global internet traffic. The US surpassed 50% adoption this year, joining countries like France and India with widespread deployment. IPv6 growth promises more efficient routing and addresses scalability. Our sources was Google IPv6 statistics and Circle ID. So, what are the biggest remaining barriers to essentially have full IPv6 adoption in enterprise environments? And that is a question that I personally don't like to answer because I don't like IPv6. I mean, it's one of the greatest security advancements we can have in the IP space for the internet protocol itself. I agree wholeheartedly that it is the future and is how we need to go. I just hate managing it, right? I'm a classic IT guy who's like, IPv4 is so easy to use, it's so easy to understand, and for me it just works. A lot of legacy systems were built on it and still do use it. I totally get the need, though, to migrate to IPv6. I wholeheartedly support its adoption, and it is the future. I think the biggest barriers, and honestly the biggest thing to really convince most networking people is it's just a matter of time, right? With over 50% adoption in the US alone, it's just, there's going to be a point in time where ISPs are going to just really be the biggest proponents and drivers of this, right? If your ISP comes to you and says, hey, we are natively not going to be handing out IPv4 address spaces anymore, right? We're going to an IPv6 only based model. That just that is what it is, right? You might not have a choice actually here in the future if we keep going on this path of ultra widespread adoption, at least on the WAN side. I pray that we don't have to do IPv6 on the LAN side, but again, you get the same security benefits and advantages with it if you do it on both. I get it. For me, I love IPv4. Again, it's simple. Keeping that on the LAN side, at least, for me, I have so many other boundaries and protections on the internal side that I can control that keeping IPv4 might be, not worth the headache to go to 6, at least managing that space internally and having to hand that out. So again, let me know down below. I mean, if you guys are fully in support of it or if you guys are a little bit hesitant to move to it. I think it's the future. It's just one of those things that we have to go to. So our next topic is the IETF pushes new only to customer BGP attribute to prevent route leaks. So RFC 9234 introduces the OTC BGP attribute to help prevent misconfigured route traffic by flagging routes meant solely for customer propagation. This complements existing protections like the RPKI and is part of a broader routing security initiative. So our source is the IETF RFC 9234. And our question is, how soon do you think widespread adoption of this RFC 9234 could materially reduce BGP route leak incidents? Now, this, again, kind of coincides with our other BGP topic. I think any stride to secure BGP is just a net benefit to the entire internet, right? That wholeheartedly is just, it's going to end up benefiting us all, right? In our security, if we can really continue to secure that protocol, we make all of our lives more secure. I think it's going to get widespread adoption if it's going to actually push and actually pass through. It doesn't look like it's it just introduces the OTC BGP attribute. I don't know how widespread it is yet or if it's actually been passed, but it's probably eventually, it's going to take integrators, OEMs, vendors, time to figure this kind of protocol out and how to introduce it in the BGP stack. And then, of course, for widespread adoption of this protocol and actually introducing it into software updates for all of these, critical pieces of infrastructure. So I think it's going to take a little bit to get there, but this shows progress, right? This shows that we are on the right track to making this a more secure protocol. And I think that's, again, a net benefit to everyone. So our next topic is cloud networking and hyperscalers. So this one says, AWS adds IPv6 support to EC2 public DNS for easier dual stack deployments. As of May 22nd, EC2 public DNS names now can return quadruple A records for IPv6, simplifying dual stack setups and supporting IPv6 only environments. This change eliminates the need for custom DNS configuration and aids the IPv6 adoption. And our question is, will AWS shift to IPv6 DNS support accelerate the industry's transition to IPv6 only cloud networks? And again, coinciding with our other IPv6 article, I think it's only a matter of time, right? It's here, it's staying, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think, again, with the added security benefits of using IPv6 as a protocol, it's simply going to be, it's going to be the new hot thing, right? That's our next transition. So thanks AWS for adding that support. That is awesome. That's showing strides in some of their technologies for adding support to do full IPv6 environments. So I think that's awesome. Our next topic is Google Cloud showcases global WAN as a provider backbone for enterprises. So Google is promoting its cloud WAN service, leveraging its vast global network as a private enterprise backbone. With over 200 points of presence and as a global fiber network, The service office offers low latency, high reliability connections for hybrid cloud and AI workloads. And our source for this one was the Google Cloud blog. And our question is, how does Google's Cloud WAN offering compare to something like AWS WAN or Azure Virtual WAN for global enterprises, and what does its future look like? So I know Google a while ago started to do their whole fiber optic network, right? Trying to provide internet to local residences and, trying to get into that sort of infrastructure. I don't think we're there yet. I think we'll get to the point where a lot of companies are entirely cloud only and actually connecting to the cloud providers as their point of connectivity, right? We could very well see Google, AWS, and Microsoft actually being the endpoint ISP providers, right? And actually just connecting into their hyper-converged infrastructure, right? Like, imagine you're getting internet service and Google just bought out Comcast, right? Or Google is now the actual, provider of not only your network connectivity, but the endpoints that you're actually hitting. I think we're definitely moving in that direction, and I think those service providers like Google, AWS, Azure want to be as close to the endpoint as possible to pretty much have everything in their control, right? Route propagations, route qualities, right? If they can make their service better, have better reachability, it only improves the end user experience, and they just want to keep using that product. So I think this is going to become a huge thing in the future, right? A lot of companies are pretty much going cloud only. I don't think very large enterprises are going cloud only. I think they're definitely a hybrid, right? You definitely always have some sort of an on-prem physical backup, right? Because again, the cloud is just someone else's computer. So you don't have any control over that, at the end of the day, right? You can't just go walk up to Google's doors and start knocking on them and start turning your servers back on and, plugging everything back in, right? So I think it's there, but I don't think it's there for extreme large enterprise workloads. I actually think there's more of a use case for them to start doing this as, for commercially on the residential side, right? I think that's actually where a lot of this could be, taken advantage of. So, and our last section is our mergers, acquisition, and funding. So, Charter acquires Cox Communications in a $34.5 billion mega merger. Charter acquisition of Cox will create one of the largest cable ISPs in the U.S., consolidating broadband service and expanding network coverage. This merger may reshape peering relationships and service competition across 40 plus states. The source for this was Fierce Telecom M&A Tracker, May 2025. And our question is, what do you think the Charter-Cox merger will mean for enterprise broadband options and pricing, of course, across the board, and overall security? So I don't know if you guys remember I think it was a couple months, almost maybe a year back, that Cox Communications actually had an API authorization issue in all of their infrastructure, pretty much, throughout the entirety of their whole thing. And that essentially allowed anyone to gain access to like customer endpoints and act as if they were a part of Cox themselves to, do things like, remote updates, remote, execution of certain things. I mean, it was a full API, authentication bypass. So, now again, that was Cox. I believe it was the Cox business side. I don't know if it was the Cox Communications on the residential side, but, security is a mindset. It's not always a physical appliance, right? So it's really how they actually choose to implement this. So I'm hoping Charters will bring maybe some new life to those really happy Cox residents. I've only talked to people who have Cox Communications. I've never actually used it, but I know they're extremely pleased with the amazing service they get out of the internet provider. Cough, cough. So I only hope this will be a better thing for the Cox customers. But again, it's another mega billion-dollar merger, so all of your options are getting slowly smaller. And I think for internet providers, that ultimately is a bad thing, right? We want as much competition in that space as possible. So, as unfortunate as it is in that regard, hopefully it will actually bring all of those Cox customers, with maybe Charter being somewhat of a better service. I've never had either, so I couldn't really tell you. I've only had, I know a lot of people who have Cox, communications. So, I can only hope it gets better from here, but I couldn't tell you for certain if it actually will. So our next topic will be a $2.1 billion have been raised for hyperscale data center expansion in the U.S. So Black Chamber Group secured $2.1 billion to fund large-scale data center builds in Northern Virginia and other regions. The investment reflects booming demand for cloud and AI-ready infrastructure and rising interest from global institutional investors. Our source for this one was our DCD News, and of course, May 2025. So our question is, with hyperscale data center demand skyrocketing, how can power and environmental constraints be addressed sustainably? And we've already seen this in the news, right? We're, looking at the power infrastructure as a whole. Are we restarting nuclear plants, right? Are we trying to get the ground back running? We know there's a rising demand for bringing all of this inside of the U.S.'s infrastructure, and to be able to power these massive, hyperscale sized data centers, I think it's only a matter of time, right? I think that really is our next 20 to 25 years of development is, can we sustainably power the United States' demand and power needs? Because, it's a technology problem. It's not only are we having these AI and hyperscaler servers and just this massive overall infrastructure, but it's growing things like, electric cars, electric, powered devices. It's everything, right? So naturally our demand for this stuff is going to only go north. And as finite of a resource as a lot of these, precious resources we have here are, a lot of people think electricity just kind of works, right? Like you make it a utility, right? You just plug it in and things just start happening, right? But that's not the case. When you get to scales like these companies are trying to do, that's a $2.1 billion have been raised for these kinds of expansions. And that's probably just getting started. That is not $2.1 billion in total. I'm sure there's a sunken cost to that. So again, the infrastructure we have currently is already putting such a strain on the grid that we have these, power saving efforts and measure and these load sharing techniques that we have to employ just to keep the current grid alive and online. So this is only going to create an ever-growing need. And I'm super curious to see what it does in the future, right? Are we going to not only start revamping, nuclear energy inside of the United States, but are we going to be a little bit more crafty and creative on, how we have our current grids infrastructure, right? Are we going to be updating a lot of that? Are we going to be redoing some of that aging technology, right, that we once had that we've kind of put to the max and beyond, right? Where we're currently straining things beyond what they're capable of. So very interesting. That's kind of this sort of week's news in, again, don't trust me. I'm just a guy on the internet reading a bunch of stuff that he sees and kind of tries to put together. So do your own research, and hopefully you guys like the show. And let me know in the comments down below if you guys have any comments on any of these particular sort of, topics, right? Throw in the chat, whatever you guys think about these certain things. We love sparking, interesting conversations. Be nice to each other too. That's always fun. So yeah, and stay tuned for future episodes of the Layer 3 show. Again, we plan on having some future guests that we could kind of discuss some of these topics with, and some of these, trending things to get their opinions as well, not just mine, So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one.